before we leave this issue, because you were talking about, yes, Trump being a narcissist, would he be all for it? I don't know, but I also know he doesn't want an abortion ban, but everyone in the Republican Party is going to push him to enact one should he be reelected.
Yeah.
Here is what his party is saying. So there is some daylight between Joe Biden and this motherfucker, Senator Tom Cotton. This is what they're saying about student protests.
We're here to discuss the little Gazas that have risen up on campuses across America and the liberal college administrators and politicians who refuse to restore law and order and to protect other students. These little Gazas are disgusting cesspools of anti-Semitic hate, full of pro-Hamas sympathizers, fanatics, and freaks. The terrorist sympathizers in these little Gazas aren't peacefully protesting Israel's conduct of the war. They're violently and illegally demanding death for Israel, just like their ideological twins, the Ayatollahs in Iran.
Oh, that's his homie, though. He always wanted to get back to Iran. So I'm not sure, Max and Anthony, it's sort of difficult to figure out like what the catchphrase of that was. Like what did he really want to push? What's the new
he's definitely trying to enter little Gazas into the lexicon.
Yeah.
There's
there
no
we go.
question about it.
Little Gazas.
But
he sold a Netflix show called Little Gazas. It's like a little bunch of kids and a dog.
Yeah, starring Reese Witherspoon.
Very cute. Yeah.
Just little Gazas. This penis with ears has never been right about anything and has never gotten anything to stick. So I don't think that it's so bad. You know, people aren't going to pick up on little Gazas, and it just shows how desperate he is to try and frame this issue and catch some, sunlight in this whole thing.
But what's terrifying about little Gazas is he's saying that as a bad thing, right? He's saying these are terrorist enclaves. Never mind the men, women, and children who are literal innocent civilians. Never mind the surgeons, the teachers, the people who have been found zip-tied in mass graves.
Yes.
They're little Gazas, and our police officers are little IDFs. I mean, I had a tweet which was basically like, at Columbia, why not send in the IDF and let's do the satire for realsies? Like, that's like...
Well, if Netanyahu could, he would.
Yeah.
I mean, he basically lectured us last week about how to run our country. And there was a spokesperson who said, I don't know how they must have done something wrong, and that's why they got shot. And the report, but their hands were tied. So that would mean they got shot with their hands tied. And they went, well, you listen to me. And I will say that is a particular strategy that these Israeli IDF spokespeople have that is the most annoying, which is the violent over-talking. That the minute any sort of reason enters the story, it is, no, here is the script, and you must, and I think they're so confused that they're like, well, why aren't you're supposed to be doing this script? I don't get it. I don't get why you're not doing the same script as me.
They're very incensed that you would ask them.
Yeah.
Like ask them at all to be held accountable for the death of, hospital workers. Before we move on, I mean, there's a lot here, but I did just want to mention that this is one of three anti-Semitism bills that have just cropped up in the last couple weeks. Again, this is what we're doing as a country. Never mind, conditioning aid to Israel. One of them, Hakeem Jeffries is very keen on. He wants the Speaker Johnson to come and bring the Countering Anti-Semitism Act to the floor that would establish a national coordinator to counter anti-Semitism at the White House, who would serve as the president's main advisor on combating anti-Semitism in the U.S. and coordinate federal efforts on that matter. I'm sure none of that will involve policing people who want to stop the occupation or the genocide. And then finally, here is Richie Torres, who... truly takes the cake. Takes the literal money cake when it comes to the Israeli lobby. I think he's visited Israel multiple times since October 7th. He's introducing, because he loves they love this bullshit wordplay, the Columbia Act, the College Oversight and Legal Updates Mandating Bias Investigations and Accountability Act. You really just oh boy. And this is even more chilling. So not only now the DOE has this new definition of anti-Semitism, it would send, quote, third-party anti-Semitism monitors to any college that receives federal funding and revoke that funding for colleges that don't comply. Guess who else wants to revoke college funding if they don't comply with supporting Israel?
Donald Trump,
Lauren Boebert, fucking Mike Johnson, every single fucking Republican. And the liberal, I mean, these so-called liberal like institutions are walking right into that trap willingly.
One of the things that strikes me is it's amazing. Anthony used the word conflation before, and what the media has done, I'm sure we're not helping it right now, but what the media has done is they have turned this into the central narrative because it's what is on fire today. And if you simply do the math, so we were talking about this on the show the other day, that there are, Axios reported, I think, that there are 59 active protests that you would consider encampments. So something has been taken over and kids are taking up residence, not just kids walking out into the square in the middle of the day after lunch and being, with a Palestine flag, encampments. But there are 4,000 campuses, 2-year and 4-year campuses that offer, degrees in this country. So we're talking about 1.5%. And again, this is not an overwhelming movement. It's an important one, and what the students are doing is vital. But the breathless coverage, and again the ahistorical coverage, and the piss poor coverage the mainstream media is giving it by giving air to the other side of this thing, is turning this into something that gives the fodder for the legislation. But and I think it's sad. It's a rounding error. The student protests are a rounding error. And so sometimes I look at it from the other side of it, where, like Chris Hedges has been writing for years about the failure of our liberal institutions and how they become a shell of themselves, whether you're talking about the church, obviously the government itself, higher education. Higher education is so chilled on it just as an institution on its own that it doesn't need any help to shut up even more.
Right.
It has been a failing liberal institution and pillar of democracy in this country for a long time by design. That has been a designed effort starting in the 1970s, at the same time that we birthed the Federalist Society, at the same time that we were birthing the Heritage Foundation and all of these different think tanks, asking the question, how can we start to strip away all of the democratic gains that have made since the end of World War II and through the civil rights era? And so these organizations, these institutions, they're not set up to even handle this. And the evidence of that is the flip side of this narrative, which is, why aren't there more protests?
Yep.
That's really the question here, is that's how chilled the speech is. Because if you look at it, it's so few and far between. You got a bunch in New York, a handful of in Texas. I mean, the crackdown with abusing the professor at in St. Louis. I mean, this is horrifying stuff. And the mainstream media looks at these images and they're just like, they're basically saying the equivalent of, well, I got what he deserved. Shouldn't have been out there in the first place.
They're looking at that image, which I believe you're referring to, a professor who is bloody. He has blood on his forehead and he's being pinned on the ground by cops. And they're like,
broken hand, broken ribs, sent
into the pavement, the pavement.
Yeah.
We got to interview that cop. Who
of
is he?
Well, it's laziness. I mean, listen, part of me goes, it's a conspiracy. Part of me goes, or not conspiracy, but like that. It's laziness. It's just anyone who's been in a mainstream newsroom, who's been on one of those shows, knows. Nobody knows what the fuck they're talking about
because they don't want that
they
smoke.
Don't care.
They're too afraid.
They don't want it. And this is and so we have, like you were saying, Max, these institutional failures, this liberal shrinkage that's occurred. And it is throughout our systems, and it's because of it's the breaking of the barrier between newsrooms and entertainment divisions. It's the removal of the autonomy of universities and colleges to operate outside of threat of funding reduction, or having to seek funding from weapons manufacturers and various other industries that are going to then become points of protest by these organizations. And you're absolutely right. This thing is being cut off at the stem. I mean, one leaf has grown from this root, and they are acting as if it's Chicago 1968 in riots.
Well, it might be pretty soon. Give us a few months.
I know. I mean,
Chicago's going to be crazy.
It's going to be crazy, and I think it's most unfortunate because there's a lot of nobility in what these young folks are doing. And it's being cast in the most cynical way. And what upsets me so deeply is that people who claim to want to talk about their own civil right to exist or their nation's right to exist or all that sort of philosophy that's put forward is actually really just this sort of jackbooted, violent inclination towards silencing people and casting them, primarily when they're brown or Muslim, as some villainous subhuman group. And I just think that we're really treading into some dangerous water. I just don't think the 20s are going to be that great. I said it in 2020. So far, I've been right.
When was my like? When was my life? I'm trying to think of like when shit was great for me.
90s, man.
Like, make Francesca great again. I guess
90s
so.
were a party. Are you
I
kidding
guess
me?
so.
I had a really good time. I had a great
Ripping
time.
rails,
Cool.
fucking hanging
I wasn't
out,
ripping
going to the
rails.
club.
I wasn't doing that, but I was drinking Southern Comfort and smoking a lot of weed. What's going on, Frantifa? If you haven't already, subscribe to this channel right now. Hit that button. And also, you can become a patron and support the show every single week. Get access to bonus episodes and exclusive merchandise. Patreon.com/Bitchuation Room. Do it.